And then, as far as the association policies is concerned,
So association policies, it's very fact specific, right? Because
I bring it up because not all, but some of my clients and prospective clients that I speak with, they've heard rumblings in regards to group policies and shortcomings and have your own policy. There's kind of a culture understanding, especially in the medical community, of buy your own policy. The confusion arises oftentimes with association policies either marketed or misinterpreted as being individual disability insurance policies.
so they are considered a group policy, or I should say, not group in the confines of ERISA governed, because they're not. They are a separate subset where, again, you're getting a discount based on being a member of the association. When looking at group policies that you also have an association policy, pretty much every group long-term disability policy I've ever seen, when we're talking about deductible source of income, we talked about Social Security, workman's comp, they will carve out and say individual disability insurance is not a deductible source of income. Again, certain long-term disability policies will include association coverage as a deductible source of income. Others do not. So again, if you're someone who is transitioning from hospital group to hospital group to hospital group or moving across the country, you may end up with a policy that does have that offset.
So just to clarify then, so if you're with an employer that provides a policy and you had to go on claim, if you have an individually purchased disability policy, true individual coverage, they would not subtract that benefit from the group benefit you're receiving. However, if you have an association purchased policy, they may, depending on their language, subtract that benefit from the group benefit, thus reducing your overall take home pay.
Correct. Another thing with association policies, unlike individual disability policies where it follows you as long as you pay the premiums, you have to maintain, typically, from what I've seen, I've yet to see one that's worded otherwise, you have to be an active member in the association to maintain coverage.
Mm-hmm.
If you choose not to, you lose the coverage. There are some additional key differences that we see with association policies besides having to maintain membership is these policies will often have choice of law provisions where the association may be based out of state X, where you live in state B that's very plaintiff friendly. And this is a more conservative jurisdiction. The policy will dictate that if there is a dispute, that claim is subject to the jurisdiction dictated in the policy. We've seen policies that require the insured to file a pre-suit appeal to give the company. It's not in every policy, but even though I typically do that on any claim I handle anyway, give the insurance company another opportunity to do the right thing. You're contractually required to do that in some of these association policy claims. We've seen watered down language, almost like hybrid language, where it may read like a true ONOC policy, but it's not. They may have a limited ONOC period where then it modifies from a true ONOC policy to a modified ONOC policy. We've seen less favorable language with respect to the prior monthly earnings analysis in the look back period for partial disability claims. We've seen certain situations where because they're association policies, they may have limited medical underwriting. They may have in some policies, we'll see a 12-month look back period or a 3-month look back period where if you had a medical issue 3 months prior and have to file a claim within the first 12 months, that falls within the pre-existing claim definition. We've seen certain association policies that may have a 12-month look back period and a 24-month prospective period. Residual disability provisions. We've seen certain policies that require the insured to be totally disabled for a period of time before filing for a residual disability claim. Well, it's a good segue, but there are some older individual policies. We've seen riders that were worded that same way, but it seemed to have phased out over time. Gary, another key distinction with association policies that I've seen is when we talked about future increase options, certain policies that I've come across require evidence of good health or proof of good health, where there is some limited medical underwriting versus it purely being based on financial. I've seen some, but it's few and far between where there is offset language, similar to what we see your deductible source of language. Again, it really comes down to the specific policy framework that the association negotiated with. And while certain policies, the insured can go in a la carte, semi like an individual disability policy, other times it's this hybrid where they don't have the options that they otherwise would have with a true individual disability insurance product. Gary, two additional, I think, crucial points that I've seen as well come up in these policies is that, well, objective medical evidence is something we look for in most of the claims we submit. Certain claims can't be supported by that, whether it's mental health or chronic pain issues. There's a subjective component to it. We've seen certain policies that require objective medical evidence. We've seen certain policies that have specific limitations on subjective claims. And again, these are things that you don't see in an individual disability policy. The last thing, again, that I think we see in these policies that we don't see in individual policies, but it's also in long-term disability policies, some of them have specific exclusions for substance use disorder, where we'll see in an individual policy, some don't have the exclusions. Nearly every long-term disability policy I've seen has a 24-month exclusion, but they may have an absolute exclusion for substance use disorder, as well as a 1 year or 24-month limitation on behavioral health, as well as other medical conditions. You really have to look at the fine print in each policy to dictate and extrapolate out what the true differences are. But when you're looking at a policy and you're going through it with someone like yourself in the individual disability component, you truly have the flexibility not only to look at company A, B, or C, check the options you want a la carte, compare that language to the other providers, and are in control of the level of coverage and the strength of the definitions that you have. And when you're planning for your financial security and risk management, it's crucial.
So, I mean, really, to summarize, with an individual disability policy, I mean, I've sung this song for who knows how many years. With an individual disability policy, you have choice, you have flexibility, you get what you pay for lack of a better phrase, and sometimes that additional flexibility in policy language of how you were to qualify to go about a claim may cost you a little more. If you're able to get discounts through being in training or through your institution when you're, let's say, in law school, whatever, then those costs may not be as high as they would be otherwise. But in reality, if you own it, if it's yours and you're paying for it and you not necessarily dictated the terms, but had the ability to go out into the marketplace and buy what's available, then you're a little bit more in the driver's seat than if you were subject to what your employer is giving you or what an association negotiated that you're now being offered and you can then pick up.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks. I'm glad we finally got to do this. I get to enjoy some of the cuisine of Philadelphia. Well, that's always a nice thing. I'll be catching a flight on Saturday, and thanks as always, man. I appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.